The views and content expressed on the following program are provided solely for informational and entertainment purposes. They do not constitute legal advice. A podcast is not a substitute for retaining a competent, licensed attorney to advise you on your specific legal situation.
Break the business, play is work and work is play. Power into creators, have fun along the way. Break the business, doing what it takes. Celebrate success and learn from the mistakes.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is time for Break the Business, where we empower indie creators and have some fun along the way. I'm Ryan Kairalla, and it is a pleasure to have you here this week. A fine program we have for you. We got some great topics to dig into, fantastic folks to have conversations with. Our guest this week, pretty intrigued by this guest. I'm digging the guest we have coming up. In the second segment, we're going to be joined by musician John Modell of Casa del Sol, who I think has one of the more interesting musician origin stories of any guest we've had on this program. It's always interesting to hear about how our musician guests find their way into becoming an indie creator. It's always interesting, and every guest has an equally cool story in their own way, and this one is no exception. John Modell left the family business to pursue his dream of becoming an independent artist, which is something we hear a lot. You know, a lot of times people get into music and have to tell their family, I'm not going to go down the same path as the people in my family. I'm going to do something new. I want to make art. I want to be creative. And so I'm not going into the family business. I've heard that story before, but I've never heard it where the family business in question is an NFL football team, and his family is the family that owns that NFL football team. That's pretty wild. Got to hear about that story. And the music's great too. So you're going to be pretty intrigued, and you're going to have a great time hearing from John Modell in the second segment. Before that, though, let's talk. That is to say, let's bring in our co-host this week and talk about some cool stories in indie artist empowerment. Elisa Rockdock is here. Hey, Elisa.
Hello. Happy to be here.
That was such a clean introduction by me. I feel like I just nailed that.
Perfection.
Oh, that's gonna. Don't worry, that's not gonna hang over my head the whole show and just bother me and be muttering myself to sleep at night. How are you? It's so good to see you.
Good. How are you? It's been a minute.
It has been. Part and parcel of that being that you have been so busy doing cool actor, musician, creator things that you weren't here for your last co-host engagement, which to me is a good thing. Like, we obviously love having you here. We really benefit from your perspective. You bring so many different hats to bear when you come to our show as the pop culture professor, the musician, the creative, the feminist scholar, whatever you want to bring to the table, it's valuable. But when you can't be here because you're too busy kicking ass in something, that's fine by us too. We're happy to hear it. And I do want to get a career update. We want to know what you were doing that was so damn important you couldn't be with us last time. And just hearing about all the great stuff you've accomplished. But pretty wild stories I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah.
I want to start things off by getting your quick perspective on a story that we've been following for the last 3 or 4 weeks now. And I promise to our viewers and listeners who are probably sick of the Chapel Roan story that this is the last week we will cover this, unless of course something else crazy happens, and then we'll restart it again. But I don't anticipate we'll cover it any further than this week, because we have just beaten this dead horse. But if Elisa Rockdock is here, we have to get her perspective. I mean, anytime you get a Chapel Roan story, a musician story, and just an epic amount of mansplaining by somebody, we have to hear what Elisa has to say on this. Have you been following the Chapel Roan at the Grammys, saying artists should have health insurance, and then music industry executive Jeff Robin pens an article in the Hollywood Reporter saying, "How dare you think that musicians should have health insurance? That's so ridiculous. What do you want, a cookie too?" What's your feeling on this?
I believe it was once David Lynch, and I'm going to paraphrase him. David Lynch, may he rest in peace. Happy belated Twin Peaks Day to all those who celebrate. Every day is Twin Peaks Day now. Especially nowadays. But I believe it was David Lynch that kind of talked about this idea of the starving artist and why it is that people want artists to starve so much, and why it's so romantic. And the idea isn't actually that, using the example of Van Gogh didn't paint these paintings in misery. In fact, it's entirely possible that creating art was the only thing that would have made Van Gogh not tortured. That creating art was actually the place that he could find some sort of release. And so imagine what kinds of art we could have from people if their very basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs were taken care of, up to and including healthcare. And it's not like, sure, this isn't like, we're not working on an oil derrick, like this isn't the Hurt Locker, we're not, like multi-million-dollar athletes. Go Birds, by the way. I'm up on the last, throwing it all out there. But being a musician, a lot of times your body is an important part of your instrument, especially if you are a vocalist. And I feel like the bare minimum to potentially provide artists who you are looking forward to exploiting in all sorts of other fabulous ways, maybe if they can maintain some sort of security while you're bleeding them dry, record companies, some sort of security so that they can create for you and produce to whatever your contracts dictate. And I think it's going to be, I feel like a power dynamic is shifting. In as much as UMG and like all of these huge folks have power, I feel like a lot of power is starting to shift more towards the artists. And if you want to be in any kind of competitive way and take advantage of these awesome artists that are making their own way through independent methods, with the help of some fine feathered friends over here, artists are starting to maybe get some more of that power back. And if you want to be able to tie these artists down and have them be represented by you, maybe you need to start being a little bit more competitive. It's weird. It's almost like having somebody call the Hollywood Reporter and have to write an article about how mad it is that somebody is asking for something that just should probably be like a basic human right. They're shook. These companies are shook, clearly. If it doesn't feel like they've been told no before, B, by such a huge artist that has such a huge moment, that has a platform on such a big platform that, by the way, hosted by the Recording Academy. It's a very, very powerful statement to have made. And it's not so much that I'm excited that Chapel Roan did it. I'm excited for every single one of those artists that heard that message and got a seed planted in them so that they could feel a little bit more empowered whenever they do their own negotiations and they take care of their own stuff. And hopefully it represents a sort of like crack into some of this, like, it feels like an all-consuming power that record labels and companies have. It feels like maybe that's shaking a little bit, and that's a good thing. And I'm sorry that this 26-year-old had the power to make you feel so shook, Jeff.
And I think that's the funniest thing about Jeff's article is he was sort of accusing her of all talk. Like, oh, you just made a speech at the Grammys. Where's the action? First of all, making a speech at the Grammys is serious action. Like looking the record industry in the face in front of millions of people watching and taking them to task. That's pretty effing courageous. I would not have had the fortitude to do that. But everything that's happened since, between the Backline having its largest donation day ever, Halsey stepping in and donating money, a bunch of other artists following Chapel Roan's lead when Chapel Roan herself donated $25,000, right? This started a conversation. We're seeing real action happening, which just makes it all the more silly that Jeff Robin was like, well, all you did was talk. Nope, this was a pretty big action statement. Like this is going to lead to demonstrable change, and such that I'm kind of afraid that like Chapel Roan's Grammy future is now in serious jeopardy, because all those labels who control a lot of Grammy votes may never let her on the telecast again. But they can't take Best New Artist away from her. I mean, they only did that to Milli Vanilli.
That was a reference.
have to eventually explain that one to the Gen Zers. But while I have you here, Elise, I do want to get your thoughts on a video issue or a video story that was coming out. Actually, two video stories. You yourself are a creator of video through many different forms. You've made TikToks, YouTube videos, Twitch videos, and so you're pretty familiar with these platforms and how they operate. And it's something that our podcast has started to dive into over the last couple years, like making videos on Facebook. We did the telethon during the pandemic that was on Facebook Live. We're on volume.com, on Twitch, things like that. And so I was pretty intrigued that within like a week of each other, two of the major video platforms for artists, Facebook and Twitch, came out with announcements that both kind of are in the same theme of really hobbling an artist's ability to keep their video content out there. So two stories here. One, we have Hypebot reporting that Facebook has announced that beginning on February 19th, so this has already happened,
Oh no.
all live broadcasts on Facebook will be automatically deleted after 30 days.
Oof.
And currently, or at least for as long as I've had it, all of the Break the Business videos have always been there, right? Going all the way back to years ago, I could go back and find my old videos. And it sounds like we're not going to be able to do that pretty soon with Facebook. And while that's going on, Twitch has announced, according to Passion Fruit, that starting on April 19th, streamers are going to be limited to just 100 hours of highlight storage. So on Twitch, highlights are basically how you save videos. If you don't save your video or any content within a video as a highlight, it goes away after 7 days.
Yeah.
And so, these are two platforms that are now going to start capping your ability to keep your content and your old catalog on these platforms for people to enjoy. Pretty scary prospect, particularly if you're one of these very prolific video creators on these platforms. How did you take these announcements? Are these going to kind of affect the way you do things on these platforms?
It's interesting because having the career trajectory that I've had the opportunity to participate in the pivot to video from the marketing side, from a sort of brand perspective, corporate perspective, not just an artist perspective. And so from that experience, I feel like I already learned to have backups on backups on backups on backups on backups because, for example, I'm producing a live stream for a video game developer. I don't want to trust that just to Twitch. we have to have that VOD. We have to be able to clip it and create social media content. And that is what everybody is using all of this stuff for. The issue being, of course, it's not going to live there forever. And it's kind of unfortunate because then it makes it even more important for you to be able to do things like have a computer that, if you are live streaming, allows you to both broadcast and record your VOD simultaneously so that you can have it on your machine, not just somewhere in the cloud where it risks getting deleted after so many days. And it's also a huge lesson that these things are absolutely arbitrary and can change at any time. So whatever safety that you might feel on any other platform, it is fleeting, and it might change tomorrow. Which is unfortunate because then it means that if you don't have the machine that can take on this kind of extra power, you might be at a sort of disadvantage. But it is something to think about, building into your processes the kind of increasingly ephemeral nature of the stuff that you put up there on the internet and in the cloud. I feel almost like at this point, I sort of have been joking with myself. But now I'm going to make this joke real that I feel like I only want to start creating an Instagram stories now. Just ephemeral, 24 hours, it's all you have, and then it's gone. Because having to keep track of all of these different places and all of their different policies on how long videos on demand last, whatever. It's all ephemeral at this point. Nothing stays. In as much as we think that the internet is forever, on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, not so much. So make sure that you are taking strides. It's funny considering that, YouTube could not be reached for comment. So if you have basically an invested stake in either Facebook or Twitch, and if you are a partner and your contracts so allow it, diversify your platforms, add YouTube to that list of platforms, because as of yet, it seems just slightly more permanent than some of these other social media platforms. Integrate YouTube and other platforms into your stuff, but also please, please, please keep a native copy. I have been around since the zip drive and way earlier, 3.5-inch floppies. The amount of storage that you can get nowadays for such a little price and for such little actual footprint, I would recommend backing your stuff up locally as much as possible. And just generally, just take charge of your own content, create ownership. And this is all the more reason to find ways to post on site, syndicate elsewhere, and have ownership of your own distribution, because this can change in the blink of an eye.
I'm pretty intrigued by what you mentioned there about how your approach to content is changing and how you are focusing more on creating, as you eloquently put it, ephemeral content. Right? It's just I'm gonna throw something out into the universe and I fully expect it to disappear. And I don't think you're alone in that regard. I think creators' relationship to content and fans' relationship to content has changed a lot in the last few years, in that we expect to create and we expect to consume more content that we don't expect to stay, right? Artists less and less are not interested in building content that's built to last anymore, right? It's just, stuff that's out there, it's there, it's gone, next piece of content. And I'm not making a value judgment one way or another. I'm not going to come here and say, oh, we're losing recipes and but at the same time, I do think there is something a little terrifying about the idea of the content that we are putting out into the world anymore, whether it's because of our own attitude towards creating content or the practices of platforms like Facebook and Twitch now, where we're not creating content that we're preserving. Like we're losing the library function of art. And it sort of harkens back to, you go back 40 or 50 years, like how the BBC has lost whole seasons of Doctor Who from like the old days because like the tapes degraded and they weren't able to preserve it. And that material is just gone forever. And now I feel like today in 2025, we're going to see an increasing amount of content that gets lost forever because the artists and the fans just don't think to preserve it, because that's just not the way we see content anymore. But I am, I guess, a little depressed at the notion that there could be a lot of Elisa Rock Doc art that is just lost because of the way we treat content nowadays.
See, here's the difference, because this is literally a sort of separation in my head that I was making as you were speaking. The art will remain. The art will remain distributed. It will be on Bandcamp. It will be hosted anywhere you want, right? The art remains, and the art will be displayed as part of a portfolio of work. Content is different. Content is grist for the mill. It's behind the scenes stuff. It's, I'm gonna make a funny video trend using my sound so that the algorithm sees it. That kind of stuff is the stuff that I'm sort of less interested now in making kind of permanent. I feel like what is happening now is I would hope that people would use this opportunity to like actually see why it is they're making the stuff that they're making and what gods they're serving by doing so. Are you serving the gods of art and theater and love and magic and joy and creativity? Or are you serving Amazon Web Services and their video hosting platforms and and all of these like multi-million-dollar algorithms that do not care about you, especially if you are marginalized nowadays? So I would argue that I think now more than ever, it's important for you to separate yourself as an artist versus being a content creator and really recognizing what it is that you stand for. Because so much is going to disappear. What should be lasting is the actual kind of art, I imagine, that you would create, rather than focusing on all of these other things that are just kind of basically retraining our attention to make it shorter and shorter and shorter. I think that this would be a really, really cool opportunity to maybe just like, let's separate our definitions, art versus content, and really think about where it is that we can host our stuff permanently in a way that lasts so that it can be preserved. But nobody necessarily needs to see like my Vine from like 8 years ago that aged poorly. I don't know.
Well, and certainly artists should have some control over that, but I guess I'm just a little heartbroken that we even have to make that artists are forced to have to draw the line. Like what's the art and what's the grist for the mill, as you put it, because big tech is making us make that decision, right? Because if I am a Elisa Rock Doc fan, and I want to see everything that she has made that she's at least, 5% proud of preserved in history, then I don't want her to have to make a choice of, okay, this is art, but this is just content. Like, I mean, it's content now, but maybe someday it's art. Maybe, depending on the things you accomplish, the things that you do, the things that you think are mundane now are things that we might want to preserve. And, Amazon and Meta are making the decision for us today whether or not that stuff's worth preserving. And that didn't used to be the case. And to me, that kind of stinks. And specifically with respect to Twitch, I think a lot of people hear 100 hours of highlights and think like, oh, well, that's a lot of hours. Like, how can you possibly ever fill 100 hours of highlights? And,
oh my gosh.
Twitch streamers who are streaming, like, the ones who are doing like 10, 15 hours a week, you could blow through 100 hours of highlights a day, right?
A day.
Like, those folks can blow through 100 hours in highlights real fast.
Yeah. So all the more reason to, whenever you kind of hear any kind of policy change on any sort of the platforms that you use, I will say this every month I'm here. Get your sea legs, y'all. Just get your sea legs, and be ready to shift.
Yeah.
Bend like the willow, do not break.
And what do we always say? Find your own piece of real estate online where you can keep your stuff.
Yes.
Websites, email lists, things like that. And invest in Dropbox. Okay, so last month, Elisa, you were not co-hosting with us because you were too busy kicking ass in the entertainment world, and now we need a full report on what's been going on with you. Can you give us an Elisa Rock Doc career update? What have you been up to?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, Dr. Melendez with her doctor's note. I was not here in class last month because I was filming a commercial for not sure if I can say who the client is because I Googled ferociously and it doesn't look like it's aired yet. But it is for a credit union. And was helping to sell, I believe, their auto loan offerings. And I played an attendant at a car enthusiast, attendant at a weekly kind of car show full of vintage cars and things, which meant that I got to spend a couple of days in Austin. And one of those shoot days was at an actual local car meetup full of vintage, awesome, cool looking cars that I basically got to lean on one and look at another one and go, ooh, that's nice. And that was basically my job for a few hours in Austin, and best job in the world. Once again, didn't have any lines, but I might be part of the end card of the commercial. So if you see a local credit union in the Southwest area that's looks like they're hawking auto loans, you might see a redhead at the very, very end. Blink and you'll miss her. So
light on the lingo here. End card?
Yes. So at the very, very end of the commercial where you see the logo for the company, I might actually be like over here.
Oh, okay. So when they show the company name at the end, like in the final frame,
yes, I might actually be in
your
there.
mug.
Yes, I might actually be in there. So we'll see. Because I've done commercials before where I've had lines that it turns out I end up completely off camera. So who knows if I actually show up in the thing. But the check will clear at some point. So that was really, really fun. And then on the flip side, next week, I have, I literally just booked this yesterday, which is really, really fun. That's another kind of cool lesson to folks is whenever you're feeling a little bit down in the dumps and you're like, man, February was light. You never know when you're going to get a phone call from your agent being like, hey, not only did you book one language, you booked two, and it's next week. So I'm doing medical narration. So if you are using a particular medication, and you recognize the voice that is congratulating you on your journey to wellness, then it's probably me, both in English and in Spanish. So I'm doing that. Another sort of like cool cautionary tale, not cautionary tale, but sort of like lesson for all of you folks out there. I am all of 39 years old, and I took my first ever like official improv class this weekend. So
Whoa.
it's never too late, but don't wait. And that was specifically, which is really interesting, it's improv specifically for commercials. So I took a 2-day workshop on how to do improv specifically for commercials, because a lot of casting nowadays won't give you any lines. They'll just give you like, you're in the kitchen cooking something for your family, improvise a little bit of dialogue, 30 seconds, 2 different takes.
That's interesting. So you're telling me that it is possible in the production of commercials that there's not always a fleshed out script, that they'll just bring the actors in there and you kind of have to just like improv on the fly and kind of write their commercial for them?
Pretty much. And every once in a while, there might be like one line that got focus group to death for 6 months or something that you have to say because it got focus group to death and somebody in a cubicle wasted a lot of time writing that. So you have to say that verbatim, but everything else, a lot of times on the lead up to that line or the lead out to that line, it's kind of jazz, baby. And improving for commercials is a lot different than improving for like actual sort of more scripted television. Because one of the things about commercials is that it's the way that the guy described it was it's life light. So like, even disappointment is commercial disappointment. Like, we'll get him next time. It's never too sad. You can never be too sad. You always got to be just a little bit pleasant in a commercial, even when you're having like a
tears,
sinus
we're moving
infection.
some huggies here.
Yeah, it's like even when you're having a sinus infection, it has to be like a very like delicate sinus infection. You can't be like in full agony. Like even if you've been hungry all day, and you're like, you can't be when you're about to eat a sandwich. You have to be so stoked about this sandwich because this is the brand. You have to be happy about the brand. So but one of the notes that I got, and I'm sure this is going to come as a huge surprise to you, is that I'm sometimes too big. Sometimes too big in my acting. Sometimes too big in my improv.
Shocker.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so I got to learn how to dial that down.
Are you sure they didn't like mix up your notes with like notes for another person at the? Because I've never associated that particular adjective with your
Big.
creativity. I mean,
Big. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you more reserved.
Yeah, just
demure in your
concise.
Performance. Okay, big. All right, you know.
Yeah, I don't know.
To each
I don't
their own
know.
with criticism, I guess.
Yeah, it's weird. But all the more reason to but one, the cool thing is, yay, you work on your craft and you get to learn some new stuff, confirm your instincts and like validate your own instincts, which is always very, very fun when that happens. You're like, oh, okay. I wasn't completely off base with that. Thank goodness. But also, if you are lucky enough, if you are in the acting field, I cannot recommend this enough. Every class I've taken for the most part so far has been with a casting director. And it is so valuable to be in the same room with a casting director and have them physically see you and physically direct you so that they can know what you can do. So that then maybe next time, they're like, oh yeah, Lisa, I remember her. Yeah, she was great. Yeah, send her in. So if you find yourself out there in like the acting profession or try to find like the equivalent of that, it is worth any kind of investment you might make. Obviously vet anybody who's teaching, because anybody and their mother can produce an acting class, but obviously vet the teachers. But if you have a way and it's not super financially awful to get in the room with people that are like actually actively sending you auditions and things, please do so, especially nowadays where auditions are rarely in person anymore. If you can physically be there and be with a casting director before they cast you, that's huge. And it's nice because then next time I get a casting from that director, I will know exactly how not to piss them off. which is such a key. If you can make a casting director's life easier, that goes a long way towards your chances. So yeah, cool lessons learned there.
Yeah, a few things about that blow me away. One, the idea that like these classes are not just a way to build your skills, but are potential networking opportunities, which wouldn't have occurred to me, but sounds like a pretty good reason to participate in those kind of classes, even if you think, oh, I don't need to know that stuff. First of all, you can always learn more. And second of all, it sounds like, there's networking potential there. But two, I still can't get past the fact that like people don't write commercials that you're telling me that they can't get a writer to sit down and plunk out dialogue for a 15-second spot or a 30-second spot. Like, that's too much writing, and they're going to make the actor come in and just make it up as you go along.
Sometimes that's the vibe. And then especially like for the other ad, I didn't have any lines, but I still had to come up with some sort of like action, because they didn't really give me like too much to do. So I was paired up with another actor and we had to kind of walk. It's basically they give you blocking and then everything else is kind of jazz. You go from here to here until we yell cut. But then you kind of have to figure it out. And so thankfully I was able to like develop a rapport with my fellow actor and basically like we were just having a natural conversation as we were walking, and it played because we were just having a natural conversation. But for the auditions, yeah, a lot of times things maybe aren't final. Like they're still being workshopped. And a lot of time it's sort of like, let's get the right person that looks correct and that we know probably isn't going to be a nightmare and can actually sort of act. And then we'll worry about the rest when it comes to the shoot day. Yeah, a lot of times you are flying by the seat of your pants. And yeah, especially nowadays, that in-person auditions are less frequent and everybody's moving to self-tape because it's so much cheaper for casting directors. They don't have to rent a big thing and have a bunch of people drive in, etc. They can get, a huge flood of tapes. So now it's on us, the actor, to be cinematographer, director, editor, writer, yeah, and writer and talent, all in one. So being able to take classes that can help you get there when you are given so much and yet so little direction at the same time. So much text about who you're supposed to be, but like barely anything about what you're actually supposed to do. Nothing too commercial or polishy, but refined.
Now, I know you told me you had 4 updates, and I lost count of where we are. Was there another update?
Yeah. I forgot that I was a rock musician at one point.
Yes.
And I have a band called Crimson Echoes, crimsonechoes.bandcamp.com. And there have been songs that I have written. This next single, by the way, we've abandoned the album because it got too overwhelming. So now we're just going to be releasing singles and treating things one song at a time. And I'm happy to report that we are at the stage in our next single where we are going to soon book a vocal session. And vocals are the very, very last step before mixing and mastering, which means that hopefully the next Crimson Echoes single should be out in the next couple of months, barring disaster.
That's very, very cool. I am so excited for this audience and for perhaps a whole new generation of people to get to enjoy the stuff you create. Obviously, people who play Rocksmith already quite familiar with the things Crimson Echoes can do, but I think the idea of new groups getting exposed to the stuff. I love the fact that you guys are making music again. That makes me very, very happy. And that it doesn't sound like we have that long of a timetable.
Nope.
That's great. Now, you had mentioned something that is a thought that has come to a lot of independent creators in the last few years, which is abandoning the traditional album approach to releasing singles one at a time. And that is something that artists are evolving to kind of not only to lighten the workload on themselves, but it also matches well with the way that music fans are consuming music now, right? It's a lot more, sampling one artist with a bunch of other artists, playlist culture, things like that all make things much more conducive to releasing things one at a time, making each song its own release event rather than throwing everything out as one album and only getting like one big coming out party for your music.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of the approach. It became overwhelming to think of it as a unit because when I write music, it tends to be, or at least before, it used to be kind of in like 3-song spurts. And so it would be like, like these are perfect, like little like EPs kind of. And so we were thinking about it as an EP, but when we thought about like, everything times 4 that we had to do, it became overwhelming to sort of treat it as this whole project. And we haven't released music since 2009 in like a full band capacity. That hasn't been like an acoustic cover or something. Also like save for the collaborations with Down Upright, which I love. The last like major Crimson Records EP was literally in 2009. So thinking about this felt so overwhelming that I was like, we can't make people wait another 5 years or whatever the heck, another decade for this damn thing. So if it means, separating these things and it doesn't compromise the art. It's not like I'm necessarily telling like a story across 16 tracks necessarily. For the next couple of projects, I feel like there is like a little bit more of a cohesive thing. But these are songs, literally the next single is called Stagnant Waters. It is a song that I wrote in my teens, early 20s. No, definitely in my teens. Because it was like very specifically because of the theming of the song, it was pre-engagement to my husband, and it deals with that theme a lot. So the fact that this is a song that I think I wrote when I was like 17, 18 years old, and it's now finally going to come out in 2 months. It's never too late, but don't wait. Forever my advice.
Very exciting. Congratulations. Looking forward to it coming out into the world, and maybe people will be able to play it on their guitars in video game form, like some of your other catalog options. All right, let us take a quick break. We're going to be joined by John Modell in the next segment, and it's going to be a blast. Don't go anywhere. Keep checking out Break the Business.
Break the Business is presented in cooperation with Ryan A. Kairalla, PA. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA is a law firm providing transactional entertainment legal services, including contracts, business formation, commercial law, copyright, trademark, and more. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA, Miami, Florida. rkpalaw.com.
Streaming services for Break the Business provided by LEK Entertainment. LEK Entertainment is a full-service entertainment company offering everything from consultations to full-scale events and productions, including audio and video productions, voiceovers, staged theatrical productions, script and music development, and streaming services. For more information, visit lekentertainment.com. LEK Entertainment wants to help you bring your story to life.
Thanks for supporting Break the Business. If you have a question or topic that you want us to discuss, email us at breakthebusiness@gmail.com. You can follow the host, that's me, on Twitter at Ryan Kair, and you can follow the show at the BTB Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and on all major podcast platforms. And now, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to Break the Business, everybody. Ryan Kairalla here with Elisa Rock Doc, having just a grand old time. And I'm still giddy at the notion of new Crimson Echoes music, Rock Doc. This is, it does feel like 2009 all over again. I can already feel my hair starting to grow back. This is fantastic news.
Yeah, I am very, very stoked. Especially like I can't wait to talk to John, because as a songwriter, having just having something that has been like first on my heart for a while, then in my lyric notebook for forever, then playing it out, with the band for a while, and then like finally, however many years later, actually getting it out. It feels like a very, very long gestation period, but I'm excited to finally give birth.
And I know John is definitely going to, resonate with a lot of what you're saying there. Having done similar gestations, I'm sure. Let's go ahead and bring out our guest this week.
Welcome, John McDowell, to Break the Biz, where the love for music never quits. From football fields to rockin' bits, he's the man who's got the ultimate mix.
Our guest this week is a musician, songwriter, businessman, and the lead singer for San Francisco-based band Casa del Sol. Our guest started his music career years ago after pivoting from helping run the family business of owning the Baltimore Ravens NFL franchise. Casa del Sol's debut album, Strange Angels, dropped on January 24th, and you can find out more about our guest's work by visiting casadelsolmusic.com. We are happy to welcome John Modell on to Break the Business. Hi, John.
Hey guys, how are you doing?
Doing so well, sir.
Thank you for the awesome theme song you guys made for me.
Of course, we get such positive
Terrific.
feedback on those. I think it puts guests in a good mood, and we love that. And we don't want to make you mad because we have heard your nickname is Mad Johnny.
Oh no.
And so we I don't know if we want to hear from Mad Johnny. We don't want Mad Johnny during this interview, but where does the nickname come from? How did you get that moniker? There's got to be a good Mad Johnny origin story.
Well, it's not mad as in angry. It's mad about life. It's sort of like a more positive madness. I got that I got that nickname in my first band I was ever in in 1978, and the drummer was Crazy Roger and I was Mad Johnny, and we were kind of crazy. I mean, we were playing sort of blues music, but with a lot of punk energy at the time. And things would wind up getting, thrown and flying around and all that sort of stuff during our sets. So we had, some good energy, good youthful energy.
I get that impression when I listen to your music and when I look at the videos I found of you guys online. Energy is what comes to mind there, and cool, fun energy, great vibes. Let me ask you a couple football questions before we get into the music side of things. Only because, when am I going to get an opportunity to talk to somebody who's got this kind of background? I mean, this is pretty wild. And I always told myself, if I ever met anybody who had anything to do with the golden age of the Baltimore Ravens, as you did, I would say this, okay? I'm a graduate of the University of Miami. I am also currently a professor at the University of Miami. And so I want to say to you, John, on behalf of the entire University of Miami family, you're welcome. You're welcome. Ray Lewis, you're welcome. Ed Reed, you're welcome.
Those guys, they don't make them that anymore.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was really a charmed time. Ray was our first round of our first year as the Ravens. So, and we made a pretty quick climb to being world champions. It was, five in our fifth year, we won that championship, and that was pretty neat. And so much of that had to do with him. He was one of the most consummate warriors, professionals I've ever met, and such a great example to me in not just the football world, but in music and what it takes to really kind of lay it all on the line if you want to get anything cool done. And he was he's a great guy. He's like my little brother, actually. So and Ed, of course, fantastic. A lot of they brought some of that hurricane energy to the to our organization. That's for sure.
We expect nothing less
Yep.
from our distinguished alums. Who is the Baltimore Raven that if you had to start a band with them tomorrow,
Ooh.
you would be like best position? Like this is the guy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's a good musician, but who's going to bring the good band energy?
Yeah.
Whew. Well, I mean, Ray. I mean, he. You know, have you ever heard him talk?
Yeah.
He do his psych up, speech. He'd go out there and work the crowd, and people would be frothing. So absolutely. He's. He. I mean, Sterling. Not Sterling.
Shannon Sharp?
Yeah, Shannon was also had a lot of that kind of energy, and both those guys, just the dedication to their craft, and that's what you try to do when you have a group. I think it's not an unusual thing, this axis, between football and music, because they kind of all include the same thing. You sort of have to be selfless. They're both team or collaborative ventures. If you achieve the best results if you leave your ego at the door. You have each other's back. You're there for you just try to be very present in that moment and bring everything you got. So I think they're very complimentary. Always have been in my life.
I kind of want to see a Shannon Sharp led band now.
Absolutely.
I have no way. I don't know if he's any kind of good singer, but just knowing like what he does on ESPN and everything, like that's going to be a fun band. They're going to bring the energy. Now, all right. Now moving to music, John, I think the word I'm looking for is surprised, maybe even baffled by your origin story. I mean, the hundreds of guests we've interviewed around here, I've never had one who got started in music the way you did. And I need to learn a little bit more about just the thought process of what was going through your head when you made the decision to not stay with the family business of running the Baltimore Ravens and instead to pursue your creative passions going into a career in music. Take us to that time.
Okay, you bet. First of all, I have to kind of rejigger the story a little bit because it's a little out of sequence. We prior to the Ravens, we had this team in Cleveland called the Cleveland Browns, which we left there when we moved our business out of Baltimore. We left the Browns to the city of Cleveland, and
completely non-controversial. Everyone was cool with it. I remember.
Well, I asked people, is there a team playing in Cleveland now, and what is their name? So it's the only time ever in professional sports that's ever happened.
Yeah.
Truth. First time ever. First and only time, by the way, that the team was basically left to the city. So, it was a win-win. Everybody was fine at the end. I think they're still looking for their Super Bowl trophy, and I think part of that means that they've got to kind of let go of and say, well, the Browns were taken. Well, if that's the case, who are these guys playing there for you now? You haven't fully embraced them, and this is sort of like the Babe Ruth kind of thing. You got in football as in music, we have this, we call it the Quan. It's the mojo. It's the thing that's in the ether, that the spiritual aspect of it, and they kind of need to get over that and get on with it.
I love it. The Ravens are like, come on, get over it. We gave you Joe Flacco. What more do you want?
I love Joe. I love Joe. But when I was, I've been a musician my whole life. Starting from a very young kid, and I'm not a spring chicken, guys. So, man, I think I listen. My first aha moment was 1967 when I had the chicken pox. My mom gave me a transistor radio because I was bored out of my mind. I turned it on, and the Doors, "Come On Baby Light My Fire," came out of that little speaker, and I can almost still smell that little Japanese radio right now. It was such an intense moment, and we had pianos at the house. I got guitars. I didn't know how to tune them, so I tuned them to my own, tunings and whatnot, and make up songs. And I've always been a composer, so to speak. When I got and I had bands in high school and stuff like that. I went to college to study marketing. My dad, I had a brother. He really wanted the two of us working with him in the family business. Wanted his sons, and that was sort of a beautiful thing. But I got through 2 years of college, and I dropped out to play music in Chicago, and that was what I was the most passionate about. I mean, I'm the only one in my family that actually played football, so I loved football, but I was a yeah. I mean, I don't need to tell you guys, this is the world you live into. Music is it's got a lot of it's a very powerful thing. So and I was very fortunate to have grown up during maybe you might argue the golden age of popular music. We just went to see the Paul McCartney exhibit here at the De Young Museum in San Francisco. It's all his pictures he took during their first U.S. tour. A lot of stuff in Miami too when they were down there, their first tour. And just there was such great music that was so inspiring. My folks were hella pissed at me. I shouldn't cuss on this program, right? We don't cuss on the on this air, but there was some cussing that went on, and but I kind of had to follow that, and I sort of became the black. Even I was the oldest, I became the black sheep of the family. So I played music in Chicago, and then I actually, being a self-taught person, I felt it important at that point, if I wanted to make my life about this, that I actually had to go to school and study music, which I did. So I went to California Institute of the Arts. I studied music composition there, arranging, jazz, non-Western music, all kinds of stuff, and started working in as a studio musician. And when I was in studios, I was always fascinated what was going on the other side of the glass there in the control room. So I learned the technical side of it as well, the recording, the engineering side. And so right from the get-go, I've always had these two things going on, both the music side and the technology side. And that served me well. I managed to raise a couple kids and pay the bills that way and put them through school and all that stuff. It wasn't, and and all the time, my dad said, well, I've got an office for you. Why don't you just you can still play music. Just come back. And I was like, no, I'm doing this. My first job in the music business, real job, was the janitor at the record plant recording studios in LA back in 81 or something like that. But it was the best recording studio in town, and I watched with my eyes open what was going on there, how records were being made, how they were being engineered, the tricks, everything. And I got moved up to a staff engineer within a couple weeks, because I was pretty astute. But my folks were just like, you're crazy. This is no. And they both came from television. They knew the pitfalls of quote unquote show business. It's not a nice business. That's why we need entertainment lawyers.
Hey.
Thank goodness, right? But I stuck with it, and I rose up. So I was doing I was a staff writer for a music publishing company, and I was also mixing and producing stuff, and then for 6 years became a mastering engineer. And we were doing all the remastering stuff for Jimi Hendrix and Grateful Dead and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Fleetwood Mac, all the stuff for Atlantic Records, which was a fantastic. I had a great boss at the time, who was one of my best friends now, and it just brought my game pretty high. It wasn't until '95 when we actually moved our company to Baltimore, and we had a football team. It had no name. We had white helmets. The spring practices that year, the uniforms were black and white, no logo, no name, nothing. We had Vinny Testaverde, we had Ray Lewis, we had John Ogden, we had the old Colts facility, which was had been condemned for mold. The old Memorial Stadium there, which had grass growing out of where the street seats were supposed to be. And my dad, during that time, had gotten very, very ill, was in the hospital. Well, we almost lost him that time. And really had to step back. And my brother, who had been right from the get-go kind of working with my dad and wanting to follow in his footsteps, he called me up and he said, John, I'm sitting in a, freaking office that we're subletting from a law firm. We don't have a name, we don't have anything, and it's just me here, and you got to come help me. You got to come help me, bro. And I was like, yeah, okay. Extraordinary circumstances. I was doing probably the best I'd done in my career in music in LA. I had a music production company. I owned a recording studio. I was doing great. And I said, well, I'm going to have to go back and forth because I can't just, chuck that. My kids are in school there. So I started a 15-year, habit of being bicoastal and flying back and forth almost every week, So it was a very interesting time in my life. But that wasn't until then that I got involved with the family business. So I'd been, I had some modicum of success before that in the music world. But when I went into that, I said, I'm sorry if I'm just going on. I did kiss the Blarney Stone once in my life, like a proper Irishman. But I said, well, it'd be good if I could bring some of my skills to bear in this. And he said, well, absolutely. We want to, at the new stadium that was being built for us there in Baltimore. And he said, I want it to be the most technically advanced stadium. I want our game day presentation and our broadcast facilities and everything to be state of the art. It was right when things were moving towards digital in terms of video and broadcast. We were the first ever to use LED video screens, and it was us and the band U2. I wound up working with downstream. I made a film with those guys, but at the time there was this one small company in Canada that discovered the blue LED, and you need RGB, red, green, and blue, to make full video. And so we took a risk on it, and they were the first to ever do it. Now it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. And so we put the biggest screens that ever been in any stadium, a complete surround sound system, so that when the game's going on, I was actually, piping sound from the parabolic microphones on the field up into the house so people could hear all the hits and the sounds of the game. Because it's a show. It is a show, and your people who are up in the nosebleeds, they, it's still not a cheap ticket, and they've brought the family. Yeah. And you want to give them something amazing. And if you're up there, to be able to blow the game up such that you can see the texture of it and the details of it, and whether that ball is on the, the nose of the ball, cross the line, all these little things, it really involves them a lot more. And, that was one of our goals, is to really involve the crowd a lot more, and also, to shove it up the bum of the opposing team. We did a lot of, I had a big file of warning letters I got from the league. You can't do this, we don't know what it is you're doing. We've never seen it before, but we know you can't do this, and we try to create some real home field advantage with some of that kind of stuff we did. But it was really neat. We brought rock and roll into the game of football.
Well, and I love how you took those same technical skills and entertainment industry know-how and just showmanship and presentation skills to bear in your, more modern work now as a musician. Like the way you put your videos out there is really great. Your website is gorgeous. And
thank you. Wow.
It's always cool to see when indie artists can, take advantage of that stuff and really present themselves well. And your band Casa del Sol is a masterclass in that. I encourage our viewers and listeners to check out casadelsol.com and, check out what you got going on with the new music coming out and everything. Really, really fantastic. Before we let you go, John, because we're running up against radio here, but I think I want to bring you on again soon to get more music and football stories. But before we let you go, I got one last question for you.
Of course.
Do you have any last tips for the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward?
Whew. Wow. It's as you guys just were talking about before I came on, it's a very different world out there in terms of getting known. I mean, on one side, anybody can publish. It's very democratic, so it's cool. But on the other hand, you have storms and storms of media to cut through to find who's good out there. There used to be the great DJs around the regional DJs around the country who acted as curators and found stuff and were able to kind of bring, the Elvis Presleys out and the Beatles and the David Bowies and all the great stuff, the Michael Jackson. So now you're kind of going it on your own. Almost everybody's indie, unless you're Taylor Swift, and even they are kind of run their own show. I think you have to, obviously you have to kind of learn as much as you can about all this, this landscape, and it really helps to have kids. I'm 65, but I've got a 32-year-old and 26-year-old who grew up with all this, and are very helpful, in making the videos, the website, all that stuff. I don't make that, but I try to, write the songs and make sure the band is good. I think part of it is having faith in what it is that you do, work hard at it, listen to as much as you can, because it's always good. Being a good musician, part of that is being a good listener. Listen to everything, from classical to funk. I mean, there's Duke Ellington said there's only two kinds of music: good music and the other kind. So be a student of it, and work hard. Work hard at being yourself and trying to find your own uniqueness. Because that's, in the end, it will make you stand out.
Our thanks to John Modell and Elisa Rockdog. Thanks to producer Lauren.
Lisa,
thanks to Ed Reed and
Yeah.
Ray Lewis and
Lewis.
Vinny
Ray
Testaverde. Go Canes. And thanks to all of you viewers and listeners for checking out Break the Business. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much.
Break